Good afternoon and welcome. Today is Monday, May 13th, 2024. This is our weekly Community Planning Infrastructure and Resources work session. Our main topic for today is to get an update on a transportation survey that we conducted, I believe, April 8th through April 21st. And so that is our main topic. Then we'll allow a little bit of time for our Community Development Director to give us any relevant updates, as well as our CPIR Director. My name is John Kafalis, Commissioner from District 1. I'm joined by Jody Shedak McNally, Commissioner from District 3, and Kristen Stevens is not with us today. Let's see, I think that's all I have to say. Apologies to the public for starting a little bit late, but that's how it is sometimes. We'll begin at 1:38 p.m. Leslie, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, commissioners. I will introduce myself to start. Leslie Ellis, Community Planning Infrastructure and Resources Director, and I will soon hand it off to others on the team here to present this item, but I just wanted to thank our engineering staff and Road and Bridge team and our consultants who all worked on this. Mark Peterson and Rusty McDaniel, who you see, Eric Tracy was also part of this, and Todd Jurgens couldn't be here today. And then Jenny Young is here from Felsberg, Holton, Ulevig, our consultant, as well as Ryan Winger from Magellan. And so they'll do the presentation today. Mark will kick us off with a little bit of background information. So as you mentioned, the survey was administered in early to mid-April, and the team put a lot of effort and attention into forming the questions, and now we're at the stage of interpreting the information. We're not here today to present a recommendation about what to do next. Really, this is just to present the data and the information, answer questions. Feel free to ask questions as we go through the information, and then we look forward to continued conversation with you and others in the community. We have been trying to keep our partners, other municipalities in the region, and others also informed as we have these conversations with the public and get information and feedback from the public. So I will, as I mentioned, turn it over to Mark and then Ryan.
Leslie,
yes.
Forgive me.
Yes.
I neglected to mention that our County Manager, Lorenda Volker, is also present. And Lorenda, before we turn it over to Mark and the consultants, is there anything you'd like to offer, please? Sorry about that.
That's fine, Commissioner. I think Leslie explained it perfectly. We're at a place to present data to you, and that is today's agenda item. You all, please ask questions along the way. There's a lot of information here on these slides, and so we hope that you'll, although we're in a very formal room, we'll have an interactive dialogue with the consultant.
Great. And just as a bit of a reminder, if folks could talk into their mics as much as possible. I was having a little bit of trouble hearing Leslie. Shall we turn it over to Mark Peterson?
Let me just add one final thing, which is we have really the bulk of the time here until about 5 minutes before we end. So we'll focus on this topic for the next 45 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mark Peterson, Engineering Director for Larimer County here. I wanted to touch on a couple items, mainly so that as we are recording this, that the public or anybody watching it will have context for it. So these slides are not in your packet, but I just wanted to remind everybody that this all goes back to the Larimer County Strategic Plan. And in that, in one of the goal areas, we've got Goal Area 3, which is a natural and built environment, and Objective 1 is addressing current and future transportation needs. So that's shown on the left side of your plan. And then put in a slide so that we could zero in on exactly what text is in that. It's identifying a long-term sustainable funding for capital projects in unincorporated areas. So that was sort of what spurred the need to survey the public about transportation in unincorporated Larimer County. So toward that end, Jenny's already been introduced, but Jenny Young with her staff at Felsberg, Holt, and Olevig were brought back on board. Jenny's got a long history with the county and looking at transportation and transportation funding. sub to Felsberg Holt is Magellan Strategies, and Ryan Winger will be up here and give you the detailed results from the survey. But we went through the process, as Leslie already explained, to develop a whole suite of survey questions that could be put out there. A flipping book was developed, and you've got the slides from that flipping book. It's available online currently on our website. And the survey was then initiated. We also worked closely with Michelle Bird, and she helped facilitate an email blast to the subscriber lists on her listserv that also made the public aware of their ability to participate in this survey. So as was explained, the survey went out. We could go into the flipping book if you want to. That really is out there. There's 16 pages. It was intended, again, to give the public some background on the topic if they wanted to refer to that before they tried to participate in the survey. So I guess to take advantage of the time we have, I would at this point have Ryan come up and we'll get his presentation up on the screen.
Welcome, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thank you all for your time.
If you could turn on the podium mic, please.
And Ryan, would you be kind enough to identify yourself for the record?
Ryan Winger, Director of Data Analysis for Magellan Strategies. And thanks, Mark, and look forward to diving right into this. So as you see there, our dates were April 8th through the 21st, so did this in the first part to the mid part of April. And let's get right into the methodology of how the survey was conducted. So you see over there on the left side of the screen, an example of a text message that was sent to voters in Larimer County. Please participate in this important survey. We want to hear from you. As Mark mentioned, we also were kind of coordinating with the county's public affairs team and Michelle Bird. She shared a link through the email list there as well. Basically, the idea is we wanted to kind of cast a pretty wide net and make sure that this survey was out there and that folks were well aware of it. And I think that strategy paid off. We were able to complete interviews with 3,567 residents, which is a really solid number to work off of. Gives us a pretty a pretty low margin of error, so we're pretty confident in the results going forward. And the other reason we're confident is we're able to weight them to represent what we expect turnout to be for this November, because that's what we were asking them about. And so this slide just shows the differences between presidential year turnout, odd year turnout, midterm year turnout, just so you can see how the survey was weighted. And so let's get right into it. Do you approve or disapprove of the job the county is doing, managing and maintaining our transportation system outside of city limits? With that, that important distinction, so that they know we're trying to at least set the table for. We're talking about roads and bridges in the system outside of city limits. 53 approve, 32% disapprove, 15% no opinion. And that's pretty average anytime you're talking about any kind of government services. To be over 50 is a pretty good place to be. What improvements would you like to see in Larimer County, and where would they be? Obviously, that when you just say transportation improvements, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so these were kind of the core themes that came out when we asked this open-ended question. Bicycle infrastructure enhancements, road and maintenance and safety, public transportation obviously is there as well, traffic management and infrastructure, and pedestrian safety and access. Those are really the kind of 5 big themes. And we asked someone, hey, we're thinking about making improvements in transportation. What would that mean to you? And then again, to try to provide context and set the table for the rest of the survey, we showed this map to the respondents and said, it's important that you know that we're focusing on the roads, the system that is in unincorporated Larimer County. And so all of the shaded, or the brown lines on the map outside of the gray shaded city limits. So just moving forward, they have this information. And then we asked, please indicate the importance of the following improvements. So rather than hearing it straight from them, we're giving them a list. And this is kind of the ranking in order of what was most important. And you see there's really 2 or 3 top improvements that are most important to respondents. Not surprisingly, it's safety, road and bridge maintenance, intersections, and signal timing. Those are the ones that were over 80% said, hey, yeah, that's at least somewhat important to me. And you see there, very important, improving safety along roadways and intersections, that's 60% very important. So totally makes sense when someone's thinking about using the transportation system. What do they want most? Is it convenience or is it safety? They want to be safe before anything else. And then going on down the list, things like sidewalks, bike lanes, widening roads and bridges. It's not that these things aren't important. Still 2/3 of or more of folks are saying they're at least somewhat important. They just don't hit that 80% level. Explaining too that the system, investing in the system can also have many benefits, right? So a similar kind of question, but we're asking which of these benefits are most important to you personally? And the most important, perhaps not surprisingly, is improved readiness for emergency situations such as fires or floods. Right? They hope something like that doesn't occur, but when it does, they want the county and first responders to be able to respond very quickly. Reduce traffic congestion, again, not a surprise there as well. That's important. And then, again, going back to that idea of safety, those are really the top three. Then you get into increased options for how people travel around the county. 3 out of 4 said, yeah, that's somewhat important, with 41% saying very important. Increased access to recreation, job opportunities, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, increased access to housing options. These are all at least somewhat important. These things do resonate with respondents somewhat, just not as much, again, as these top three. Kind of shifting gears here, we're asking them, how would you rate the condition of the roads in unincorporated Larimer County? Do you consider them to be excellent, good, fair, poor, or no opinion? 4% excellent, 50% said good, which was the most common response. 32% said fair, 9% said poor. So a little bit of a mixed bag when you have, over 40% saying fair or poor. You can see it kind of varies dramatically based upon the areas of the county that they're responding from. So that's kind of interesting. You see the fair and the poor pop up more in certain areas. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The roads in unincorporated Larimer County meet my needs. 2/3 of respondents agree. So in that sense, they're happy with the status quo. Do you think the county has the resources needed to adequately maintain, repair, and improve roads and bridges in unincorporated Larimer County? 53% say yes, 26% say no, 21 don't have an opinion. So a little bit higher no opinion there. They don't really know exactly how to answer that question, but by a 2-to-1 margin, yes, 53% compared to the 26% that say no. Then do you agree or disagree with the following statement, kind of taking it out of the realm of specific to transportation? Larimer County is fiscally responsible and spends taxpayer money wisely. 50% agree, 26 disagree, 24 no opinion. So it's kind of part of the conversation when you're talking about how the county is managing its budget. So we wanted to see just in general how they're feeling. And again, a 2-to-1 margin is a pretty good place to be. We wanted to dig into that a little bit more. Please describe the reasons why you agree that the county is responsible. And it's things like, not surprisingly, road infrastructure and maintenance. They're driving around the county. Seems like everything's going well to them. Fiscal responsibility and budget management. And then quality and accessibility of services. They're just really happy with the level of services provided, and they're perfectly fine with the status quo. Of that 26% that disagree, here's the kind of themes that emerge when we ask them. They believe that there's some kind of misallocation of funds and inefficient spending, high taxes compared to the value of services they receive, and then a lack of transparency and accountability. So these folks are clearly wanting to see either more effort made by the county government to allocate funds better, or just more accountability and transparency coming from the county. And again, this is kind of outside the context of transportation specifically. This is not surprising at all. Do you think traffic congestion on unincorporated Larimer County roads is increasing, decreasing, or staying about the same? So kind of projecting into the future. And 47% say definitely increasing, 32% probably increasing. So a very large percentage that say, yes, I believe it's increasing. And again, you see that peak up to 90% in places like Berthoud and Johnstown. Do you think safety on the roads in unincorporated Larimer County is increasing, decreasing, or staying about the same? And this is a little bit more of a mixed bag. It's not quite as obvious an answer as the last slide. 17% say safety is actually increasing on the roads, even though congestion's increasing. 31% say about the same. 42% say safety is decreasing. So those are the folks that are concerned that with everything that's going on, they feel less safe on the roads. Then we want to just have an important note here, just kind of caveat that the county has not made any decisions. We want you to keep participating in the survey because it's going to help us make a decision about whether to move forward with any kind of additional funding source for the county's transportation system. Even with decades of responsible budget management, the county's needs far exceed the available funding. And we're going to get into very specific details on that here in a little bit. But one solution would be a sales tax increase specifically dedicated to transportation funding. And so a 0.15% sales tax increase would cost consumers 15 cents on a $100 purchase, would not apply groceries. Again, just spelling out the details for them. It would expire after 15 years and would generate $15 million annually to be used for these kind of improvement projects. So safety and mobility improvements on these roads, intersection safety and operational improvements, bridge improvements. So, and this is all in the survey. They're able to see, okay, this is a kind of a laundry list of things that they're able to see and evaluate. This is what we're going to get with this ballot measure. How would you vote? Knowing all that, 61% would vote yes, 30% would vote no, 9% undecided. Again, you have some pretty interesting differences there, obviously, between the different communities within the county. But in general, most of them are at least very close to 50 or over 50%. We'll now share information about the system. We're going to just share them specific data points or information to explain why this ballot measure is being considered. And these are kind of ranked in order of what resonates most with the respondents. And what resonates most, 69% are more likely to approve if they learn that there are grants available and that this sales tax increase could be used as a local match and leverage to receive more grant funds. Anytime you can say, this will help us to kind of have access to additional funds, that's a great thing to be able to say, right? Portion of the sales tax increase would be paid by visitors. That's obviously something that you get with a sales tax increase that you don't get with a property tax increase, but that resonates as well. Then again, we're spelling out specifics of, okay, here's what we have annually from all sources for bridge replacement, roadway, and intersection improvement projects. As this shows, we have X amount of need, and even if we limit it to high and medium priority, we have this need. So without sources, we're only going to be able to cover 14% of the total need or 38% of the high and medium priority needs. So again, just kind of showing them the situation that we're currently in causes 65% to be more likely to approve a ballot measure. Informing them that currently no sales tax or property tax dollars go toward transportation improvement projects for county roads, 62% are more likely. And then again, showing them again this map and just explaining the mileage of either mainline county roads and non-mainline county roads that the county is responsible for. You know, some folks are going to be very familiar with this, but if they don't really stop to think about it, a lot of them probably won't be. So just trying to educate them even further. 57% are more likely to approve just knowing that basic fact. Funding for the road system comes from state and federal gas tax. Again, just explaining where the funding comes from. So it's state and federal gas tax, outside funding through grants and partnerships, transportation impact fees, a very small amount of local funding. 55% are more likely to approve when they know, okay, those are generally the sources that make up the funding. Also, I included some graphs here showing just to what extent Larimer County is a mobile and very interconnected region based off of, looking at each of the communities individually. approximately 70% of residents and employees commute outside the community where they live. And so when we're talking about unincorporated Larimer County, that's obviously going to be an important part here. Only 53% are more likely to approve, so this doesn't resonate quite as much as some of the others. And then after going through all of that information, we wanted to ask them again. Thank you for reading through the information. Same exact information as before, 0.15% sales tax. How would you vote? Again, same list of projects. And it does move up by 3 points to where 64% would vote yes, 24% would vote no, 12% undecided. So it just kind of shows once folks are informed a little bit more, it does cause a little bit of a bump in support. Also asked to that 12% in the green there who are undecided, which way they lean, and not surprisingly, 26% lean toward yes, 21 lean toward no, but the majority of them say, I still got to think about it, I'm still undecided. So again, we didn't want to leave it there. We wanted to ask why you would vote yes. Not surprisingly, they want to see this work done because of infrastructure and safety concerns, right? They want to make sure that the roads they're driving on are safe. They see economic and community benefits to this kind of work. And they also believe that a sales tax is a fair, popular way of sharing the financial burden because, one, it affects not just residents, but tourists and folks who are not residents of the county. Why those would vote no? They just simply believe that taxes are already too high. There's a high existing tax burden already. And so regardless of what the purpose of the tax would be, they don't want to see more taxes. They also want government to take a look at allocating funds differently, spending more efficiently, these same concerns that we saw among those who disagree earlier in the survey. And then just, again, kind of related to the first one, but just the idea of economic hardship and cost of living, the idea that there's just too many folks that will be impacted by an increase in sales taxes. After they were asked about a 0.15, we introduced kind of an alternative option here of a 0.25% sales tax. And we explained the additional benefits of that in this way. In addition to the projects listed previously, this will allow the county to partner with communities and CDOT to address the needs on important Larimer County regional highway and arterial roadway corridors, including this kind of laundry list. So again, if they had kind of a major road that they thought was missing from the initial list, it's probably in this list that the county would be able to cover more with a 0.25% increase. Here's the numbers for that. 47% would vote yes, 39% would vote no. So much more of a split decision here with 14% undecided. And then we should get into some demographic questions so we can kind of get a sense of, here's the respondents that completed the survey. What's your primary mode of transportation? The vast majority said their personal vehicle. Then we're asking, how often do you do things like drive a vehicle, walk to a destination, bike for recreation? And you can kind of see the percentages there. When you get to things like bike for commuting or other purposes or ride public transportation, you're talking over 60% of respondents say they never do those things. So just kind of a relevant kind of attempting to get a picture of how folks are getting around the county. And then here's the demographics, which, as we showed in that table earlier, are weighted to reflect what we expect turnout to look like this November where possible on things like gender, age range, party affiliation. You see the rent versus own breakout there, race and ethnicity demographics. Income, we got a pretty good split across all the different income groups. I'll say that's kind of, usually we have a little bit more skewed towards the higher end of the income scale. This survey was pleasantly surprised where we got enough folks from really all of those buckets. Things like marital status, tenure in the county. Obviously, we're talking to a lot of folks here who have lived in the county for over 20 plus years, that 42%. So I think a lot of this tracks back to how long you've lived in the county and what you expect from county services. Things like four-year degree, 55% four-year degree, 45% don't have a four-year degree. Employment status, that's obviously important when we're talking about commuting and how this affects commuting. So half of the folks that we talk to are employed full-time, 55% are employed in person in Larimer County. 13% are working remotely, so they don't have that commute. Just again, just kind of interesting, kind of food for thought as we're thinking through all this. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Very comprehensive. Before we go to questions, I wonder, is there anything that Jenny you would like to add, or Mark, any follow-up based on what we just heard? Just want to give folks the opportunity.
Nothing that I can think of at the moment.
Okay, so I have various questions, but I will see Commissioner Shaddock McNally. Do you have some questions or thoughts?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ryan. This is a lot of information to think about. I want to go back to page 9 with the, do you think traffic congestion on unincorporated Larimer County roads is increasing, decreasing, or staying about the same?
Yep.
And
Let's see.
I'm thinking, I know it says unincorporated Larimer County in that statement, but wondering if folks really saw that word or just thought congestion in general. And I'm just curious, what are your thoughts or insights on that? Because I took the survey. I'll admit that but I live in unincorporated Larimer County, so I do a lot of traveling on unincorporated roads, and so I thought our family's experience was valuable.
Sure.
So I'm curious about that question about that word, and do folks understand? Because I'm wondering if some folks just totally just read right through it.
Oh, I think you're probably right. I think folks that live in unincorporated Larimer County, to your point, they're very aware of what is and isn't. But obviously the majority of, folks in the county do live within one of these cities or municipalities. And so I think there is, and it's why we try to be kind of proactive even up front, saying, here's the map. We're talking about these brown roads on the map. But even with that, just picture the average person driving around Larimer County. They're not, just clocking in their head, okay, now I'm on an unincorporated road, now I'm back on a city road. The average person's not doing that. And so when you ask them about traffic congestion, it is kind of something to where, oh yeah, I remember the other day when I was stuck in traffic. It very well could be the case that they weren't stuck in traffic on an unincorporated road, but it just kind of speaks to a general feeling of congestion. But there at least has to be at least some confusion in that sense. Confusion's not even really the right word. It's more just a perception. So
Thank you. And, it's easy to do that, to just not read the question carefully. I have to think about that all the time.
Sure.
So another thing I have is when it talked about unincorporated Larimer County on that side, and it said 84%. Do you have further data that drills down or divides that unincorporated, whether it would be northwest corners, southeast corner, southwest corner? I'm just curious if that drills down more, and if you saw any interesting data points there.
Yeah, so unfortunately not. We asked them to kind of self-identify where they live. And so those are folks that just check the box that said unincorporated Larimer. But yeah, I realize that's a really big area, and it is going to be different depending on which part of unincorporated Larimer County they live in. But unfortunately, we can't drill down more than that.
Okay. And one more question, then I'll let you ask some questions, Mr. Chair. And I don't know if you saw this, but when you talked to the folks that were, I like that you surveyed why did you vote no and the reasons why.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have other information about those folks who responded, whether they lived in unincorporated age group or affiliation or retired versus working? And I'm just curious about some of those folks that have still some, obviously looks like they have a lack of understanding, or maybe now the distrust with government in general spends money. I'm just curious about that.
Sure, yeah. So we can look at them really by any of these. I'll just scroll back to our demographics. So if we have a demographic question, we can look at folks whether to see, okay, if younger voters said they were voting no, why did they say they're voting no versus or older voters, or depending on where they live in the county, we can definitely dig into that. But I think you kind of touched on it, where a lot of this is kind of just trust of government in general, right? And so, whatever the topic or purpose that we're talking about, they're going to say, well, if you allocated funds differently or better or more efficiently, you wouldn't need to come to us and ask for a tax increase. I hesitate to say, all of it is that. It's obviously not, but that's got to make up a pretty big chunk of it. So.
Thank you. I have a few more, but I would like to have turn this over to my colleague. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Ryan. My first question is, could you remind us again about the methodology behind this survey? You mentioned 3,567 folks. Were those the ones that were randomly selected, and therefore those results are statistically valid? And if that's the case, how does that align with social media posts that were put out there? Our public affairs person, we posted on our Facebook pages. Could you say a little bit about the methodology, please?
Sure. So yeah, the 3,567 is a combination of everyone who completed the survey. But we basically, anytime we do a survey like this, because we want to cast a wide net. We want folks to be able to say, I heard about that survey, but I didn't get a text. So what we'll do is we'll look at the responses based off the text message and based off the county's, like you said, social media posts and email, to see if there's a big difference there. In this case, there wasn't a huge difference, so that's why we've kind of combined them all.
Thank you. Perhaps the second question is, I know, for example, certain roads, unincorporated roads, arterials, such as Al Canyon Road, since we've done the improvements there, there's a lot more truck traffic. I mean, were you able to glean any insights about the different kinds of vehicular traffic and how that may influence our decisions around, what might be the best time to go to the voters?
So you're talking about, do folks view the condition of the roads as something that's caused by trucks, or?
Well, I think it's the volume of truck traffic. I guess maybe, pulling out, it's when vehicles that are on the road are not just, automobiles, different kinds, but were we able to discern any of that? And is any of that information relevant to our decision making? And actually, one thing maybe related to that, Ryan, is, and I suspect there wasn't a question about this, but it might be something to consider. So there's a lot more discussion about front range passenger rail, and at least with some folks that seems to resonate. And one of the issues with front range passenger rail is you have various stops along the way, but then the trick is, how do you get to that last mile? People leave their homes. How do they get to where the train's going to stop so they can go down to Denver without driving? Was there any thought given to those kinds of subsets of information that might be useful?
Sure, yeah. So I think
sense.
to get at a lot of that is why we kind of wanted to ask this question before we got too deep into the survey. And yeah, you see there are public transportation improvements. So, certainly among, it kind of correlates more to younger residents or to residents who have lived in the county for a shorter period of time. They do expect more in the way of public transportation when you're talking about improvements. But yeah, to your point about trucks and other kind of traffic that is really kind of, hard on the roads, especially in unincorporated Larimer County. It wasn't prevalent, but you see that a little bit where folks say, well, these companies or the folks that are most responsible should be responsible for paying more of it rather than taxing folks. And so to answer the commissioner's question from earlier, there is a little bit of that where some of the no voters say, yeah, it's a sales tax, but it's still not exactly fair because I put the blame on on other actors that should be responsible. So.
Maybe a third question at this point, and then turn it back over to Commissioner Shattuck McNally. And I think one of the observations I made was that the approval of some of these things tended to be less in the unincorporated parts of the county, recognizing that most of our population is in the municipalities, but the unincorporated folks who would benefit most directly are the ones that are perhaps more skeptical of something like this. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, let me just get to a slide here. Yeah, I mean, I think in general, it could just be general, partisan makeup of the folks who live in unincorporated Larimer County that are maybe less likely to support a tax increase for anything, even if it stands to benefit them directly.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah. Commissioner, other questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm glad you're on this slide. So when we look at, I see a lot of these combined, definitely no, or probably no, or definitely yes, probably yes. Can you kind of expand on the research or best practices behind that? And then, of course, undecided, but just how, I still see like 31% that say probably. And so knowing that the ballot is the reason I'm asking this question is knowing the ballot coming up or for just voters in general, there's things coming on for other measures that the cumulative effect of voters voting, how does that impact these kind of results? Because this is a lone.
Sure. Yeah, this is in a vacuum. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so really that's why I would say in any kind of pre-election polling, you're not looking for just 50% plus one. Like that shouldn't be your target. Your target should really be 60. And so we're kind of right there with this because you do just generally assume that there are going to be external factors beyond your control, whether it's, to your point, a very crowded ballot or a general economic downturn or just something that is going to start to chip away maybe at those probably yes voters and turn them into probably no voters, whatever the case may be. So that's definitely something to factor into. This is a snapshot in time, and it is done in a vacuum. I wish we could replicate all that the ballot's going to look like, but unfortunately, no one would take the survey at that point. So.
Thank you. And when I go back to slide 16 after, or page 8 after slides 15, when I look at that, or which one I'm looking at, the congestion one back to, all right, which one am I looking at? Oh, yeah, the one, that's it. Larimer County is fiscally responsible, spends its taxpayer money wisely, and we have 26% who disagree. I'm assuming that if I asked you about that 26%, you would have able to tell me if those are kind of the same folks who voted would not support, and also those demographics are whether they're unincorporated or certain demographics, so we kind of know not who those people are, but kind of that subgroup, who they are, what concerns they are, where they're at. Only if they're unincorporated areas. Of course, we don't know who answered these surveys, but I'm curious how we can help folks. Provide them that fiscal transparency and accountability that we know there's there because of the website and the discussions and meetings we have and documents available. Just curious to help us know how we inform folks and help educate them, and also this kind of correlates to our strategic plan because part of that is to go and make sure folks understand what we have been doing, what we are doing, and help educate that. So it's part of that as well. So
yeah, and that really is why we ask a question like this, even though you get 1 in 4 people that say I don't have an opinion. I don't know how to answer that. Just because we want to know, is there something, setting aside the issue of transportation specifically, do they just think in general that the county is not spending money wisely? Because if they don't think that, they're going to be less likely to approve of anything, whatever the subject matter is. So yeah, we can certainly look at the correlations between someone who says they disagree here and whether they're a no voter on the ballot measure. I would imagine that it's a lot of the same folks, obviously. Here we have 26% disagree. And when you get to the uninformed ballot test, 30% are voting no. So, those numbers are there's probably a lot of, in the Venn diagram of respondents, there's probably a lot of the same folks there. But yeah, so it's just a matter of, we do see that you can move folks after they know the information. So it's just a matter of educating them with, okay, even if you're very happy with the status quo, here's what the future looks like without this, and kind of painting that picture for them.
Thank you. My last question, at least for today. You've looked through this data. You're a subject matter expert at, surveys and areas. So I don't know what I don't know. So what question are you hoping that we would ask about these results that we haven't asked?
That's a good question. I think we don't do a ton of polling specifically on transportation, right? So I don't have, off the top of my head, a ton of other contextual data from other counties. I mean, that would be, if I was you, that'd be a question that I would be curious to know is this lining up with what you're seeing in other places, right? And so we don't, like I said, do a lot of transportation, but we have done a lot of polling this year where even we're testing for the same entity a property tax versus a sales tax. And we're finding pretty much everywhere that a sales tax is more palatable for a lot of respondents. And I'll also say that I think we're above 60% here because a lot of folks don't view a 0.15% sales tax as a very large ask. And you do see that in the verbatim responses where they say, hey, it sounds like we're getting a lot for a little bit. And so just from a context standpoint, I think looking at 15% on a $100 purchase, a lot of respondents read that and say, that sounds reasonable.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a couple more questions. I think we can get through that in the next couple of minutes, and then we can move on if that's the wish of everyone. One is, it's good that I think that you provided the map and provided some context, the map of unincorporated. I wonder if you got into paved roads, gravel roads, and what the implications are there. Also related to that, in terms of explaining things to people and the sales tax and the potential 15 cents on $100, did we explain to people that the current 8/10% is all for dedicated purposes, that we don't use any of that money for general fund purposes? And I wonder if explaining about gravel, unpaved roads, explaining about what we currently have and how that's for specific purposes. Let me stop there if you guys looked into that.
Yeah, so we didn't, let me go here. I mean, we didn't necessarily get into the specific detail of gravel versus paved, unpaved roads. Obviously, folks, if they're able to look at this map and just conceptualize and kind of identify those, but no, we didn't specifically call that out in the survey. And sorry, what was your other question?
Well, currently the county sales tax is 8/10%. This would potentially add another 0.15. Was it made clear to folks that all of that is for specific purposes like open space, like behavioral health?
Yeah, so we got, we kind of touched on that here. We're saying currently none of this goes towards improvement projects for county roads. But no, we didn't necessarily get into the weeds of the budget and say, but that is that's an important point, because they'll say, well, why can't you just move some of the existing sales tax dollars in? And obviously because it's all dedicated, like you said. So we didn't specifically call that out, but we did a little bit in saying Right now, none of this money goes towards county roads.
No,
Could I
thank
also,
you.
could I
Yeah,
make a
yes.
point, Commissioner?
Yes, of course,
So
Mark.
in the flipping book, we did have a page that addressed sales tax and the fact that it's strictly dedicated towards the 4 specific
Thank you.
services.
And if I may offer a suggestion, it seems to me that as we move forward with our deliberations on this matter, I think it would be, one thing we may want to consider is how we've managed those funds that are currently on the books in a responsible, fiscally responsible way, and how it's benefited the community, and therefore suggesting that we have a track record of being very responsible regarding, well, all of our funds, but certainly the sales tax funds. Just a thought. If you'll bear with me, just another question I have, thanks, Ryan, is it's interesting that on the graph or the slide that shows the importance of improvements in the unincorporated and the importance of transportation to you personally, why did you ask it that way, and what were some takeaways that you all got from the way you asked those questions?
So really, we included these towards the beginning of the survey
okay.
just to kind of get the juices flowing and get them thinking about transportation improvements. But yeah, so we really are coming about it from 2 different angles. These in terms of how important these are for the county, but also these in terms of the benefits to you personally. And you see some overlap between them, but there's also kind of important differences, I think, where just in general, safety comes on as the number one, and here, readiness for emergency situations such as fires or floods, that's obviously a safety issue as well, just in a little bit of a different context. But here, we're talking about the benefit of reduced traffic congestion. So it's coming at it from kind of the other side and saying, what would this mean to you personally? Whereas on this list, we have things like improving intersections and signal timing. Well, that's a way to talk about traffic congestion, but we're not being as direct about it. It's more, here's kind of the improvements that we could undergo.
Okay. Then my final question, thank you, and that is if we could go to the voting demographics slide.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. What is your takeaway from, what is that slide telling us?
So really what that slide is telling us, if you want to see a real contrast, obviously you can look at something like 2023, the last comparable odd year election compared to the last comparable presidential election. And you see things like party affiliation, gender obviously doesn't jump around that much. But what really jumps around is the age group of who's going to vote. So that 18 to 34 age group makes up less than 15% of the vote in a typical odd year. Back in 2021, it was even less than 14%. In a presidential year, they get all the way up to 28%. Because what's driving turnout, obviously, in a presidential year, and this no surprise to anyone, is what's at the top of the ballot, right? And so these folks are very likely to vote this November in a way that they would not be likely to vote if there wasn't some, more high-profile race driving them to vote. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Commissioner, anything else before we move on? I believe we have concluded our questions for today. This was for information purposes only, and I imagine folks listening and watching will know that there's a lot more discernment that we need to undertake before we make any kind of decision. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Mark. Well, we'll now invite our esteemed and very resilient Community Development Director. She's to give us a bit of an update, and then we'll see if our equally esteemed and resilient Community Planning Infrastructure and Resources Director has anything to share. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Rebecca Everett, Community Development Director. And I have only a couple very brief updates for you today related to land use hearings scheduled for next Monday, May 20th. So you had previously had 2 hearings scheduled for May 20th, a 3 o'clock hearing and a 6 o'clock hearing. The 6 p.m. hearing was intended to be an additional hearing date for the Thornton Water Project 1041 application if you needed it. We do not have any items for that agenda, so the evening hearing next Monday will be canceled, and that should be reflected in your schedule that you'll see at Admin Matters tomorrow. Second, the 3 o'clock hearing next Monday, May 20th, is a relatively light agenda. We have 3 items that are scheduled for the consent agenda currently. It's possible any of those 3 could shift to discussion, but at this time, that's what we have planned for the May 20th land use hearing. And that's all for me for my updates today.
Thank you, Rebecca. Commissioner, any questions or comments? Thank you very much, and thank you for reminding us that we will not be having a 6 p.m. land use hearing. Leslie, is there anything you'd like to share?
No, I do not. Thank you very much for your time and your comments and questions today.
And before we sign off, just want to make sure there's a proper shout out for our county engineering folks and our consulting folks, all the work you've been putting into this. So I want to acknowledge your work and your efforts. Yes, Leslie.
We should also acknowledge, not ignore, Lori Kadrich, who participated in this as well. She's sitting over there. I don't think we ever gave her a shout out.
Thank you, Leslie, and forgive me. Indeed, a well-deserved shout out to our Assistant County Manager. Thanks. Well, now that we've completed our round of shout outs at 2:28 p.m., we are adjourned. I wish you all a good day.